September is going to be interesting.
There's a lot going on. There's so much dynamic change with the inner planets, while the outer planets are either slowing down or retrograding. But it feels like this is what's going on.
Each one of us can only manage our own reality. We cannot control what the rest of the collective is doing, but we do have impact on the collective by our choices.
It is our job, our duty, our responsibility to each play our role. This is the act locally part of the think cosmically.
We can see where we're doing that in our own lives. Where are we, through force or suppression, not addressing things that need to be addressed at the core?
The other thing that I think is really important is establishing community. Be joyful. That's it.
Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to the Astrology Hub podcast. We are here for our September forecast with the great Rick Merlin Levine. And he was talking before we went live, and he said that September is going to be interesting. I'm trying to do my best Rick impression, and that we don't know what's going to happen, but a lot's going to happen. So we have a lot to talk about, and I can't wait to dive in with all of you. Before we do that, have you subscribed to the channel yet? If you haven't, please do so. We feature weekly astrological updates with astrologers like Rick Levine, Christopher Renstrom, other legends in the field, also up and coming legends in the field of astrology, just to keep you in tune with the cosmic rhythms and to help you learn astrology while you do it. So go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Also hit the notification bell so you are alerted anytime we have a new episode. Thank you so much for doing that. It really helps us to support the channel and get it out to more and more astrology lovers around the globe.
And I should say that you are really good, you or your staff or whomever it is that does it, at finding new talent and people. It's so important that just those of us who have been around for, oh, this is going to sound awful, forever, are not the only good astrologers on the planet. And it's really refreshing and important to hear the new voices, the young voices, the people that we didn't know are awesome, but have been being awesome for just as many years as we may have been. And so you do a really good job on that. And it's really an important part of what Astrology Hub does, I think.
Thank you, Rick. I always think we're going to get to the end of the line. Like that we have had to have exhausted all the great options, but they just keep turning up.
It's like the many-headed Hydra that every time you cut one off, two are there.
Exactly. All right, you guys. So let's dive into September. Rick, let's start with that big picture. Oh, first of all, we have to comment on your shirt. This is such a great shirt. I actually wanted to make this shirt for Rick. He beat me to it. And I said, Rick, can people buy it? They're going to want it. And he said, well, sell it for me. So eventually we'll figure out a way to get this on our website. Go check out the shop. Maybe by the time we air this, we've been able to figure it out.
And this was a gift from Mira at Backstage Astrology. And so, thank you for that gift.
It's amazing. Okay. All right. So let's talk about September. Let's start with the big picture. If you had to just give an overarching read on the month energetically, what's it all about?
There's a lot going on in September. I mean, August was kind of like a more of the same, and there was some potential for some light, for some positive stuff in the midst of so much heaviness and confusion and darkness. And the outer planets are still pretty much retrograding. We pick up Uranus as the last of the outer planets to turn retrograde. And so we have now, working from the farthest out planets, we have Eris and Pluto and Neptune and Uranus, which turns retrograde on September 5th. And Saturn retrogrades, but Saturn retrogrades back into Pisces on September 1st, actually just moments after midnight Pacific time. So we're getting this double retrograde energy of we're back with Saturn and Pisces. Neptune will back up into Pisces too. Uranus, which is at 1.5 degrees of Gemini, turns retrograde, it'll back up into Taurus, of course. And so we're in this deep whirlwind of things moving backward. At the same time, the inner planets are flying. I've not seen a month in a while where there's so many sign changes because Mercury, we begin the month with Mercury at the end of Leo, but on the second of September, Mercury moves into Virgo, and Mercury is moving so fast that by September 18th, it moves into Libra, and by the end of the month, it's just about ready to move into Scorpio. Mercury actually enters Scorpio on October 7th. So the inner planets are flying. On top of that, Venus moves into Virgo on the 19th. Mars moves into Scorpio on the 22nd. All the inner planets are changing signs. And of course, the sun moves into Libra on the 22nd, which is the cardinal sign, which means that's the autumnal equinox. There's so much dynamic change with the inner planets, while the outer planets are either slowing down or retrograding. And then there's one additional thing about the outer planets, and that is, we've been talking about the upcoming Saturn Neptune conjunction, which got really close in August, and now it begins to separate a bit as Saturn is retrograding back into Pisces, and Saturn and Neptune will turn direct and they will become perfected in their conjunction in February. But here's the other thing, is that the bigger picture has that Neptune at the midpoint, halfway between Uranus and Pluto, that are making their trine. And I think last month we talked a lot about how I felt that July and August were kind of being pulled by this attractor in July of 2026.
Hmm.
Well, that attractor in July of 2026 is partly set up by the exact Uranus Pluto trine. Uranus in Gemini trines Pluto in Aquarius, air to air. Now, for the month of September, Uranus and Pluto get within 7 minutes of being exactly trine.
Hmm.
And they not only hold that 7 minutes of trine from September 16th through the 22nd, that's like almost a whole week, but they're within a quarter of a degree. That's 15 minutes of orb from September 4th all the way through October 3rd. They're within 1/4 of a degree of being trine. And so we're feeling this energy again that is not perfecting until next summer. But between their trine and Neptune's sextile to Pluto on one side of that trine and its sextile to Uranus on the other side of the trine, and how these three planets, the Uranus Pluto trine with Neptune at the middle point, how they're being basically buzzed this month on and off. Remember how many planets I said are changing signs? We have the sun changing signs into Libra. We have Mercury changing signs twice. We have Mars changing signs, and we have Venus changing signs. Every time a planet changes signs, it goes from 27, 28, 29 degrees of one sign to 0 degrees of the next. And they are then pulling in aspects to Uranus, Pluto, Saturn, and Neptune, all at late degrees of one sign to 1 or 2 degrees of the next sign. And so that's why there's so much going on this month. Oh, and then just throw in a couple of eclipses just to stir up the energy.
Okay. All
That's what
right.
we got this month.
Whew. Okay. So, Rick, we have outer planets going backwards. We have inner planets whirling forward and changing signs. We have Neptune at the midpoint of Uranus and Pluto, with that kind of being a foreshadowing for what's going to be happening in July of 2026. And then we have eclipses. Would this mean that our personal lives may be going through some dynamic shifts, but that there's like a foundational undercurrent that's also shifting and setting the stage for a longer term new story or new plot, and that we're getting like a hint of that in this month about and of things that will be unfolding in July of next year.
Yeah, what you're saying is a good summary, except we need to say that that foundation with those outer planets, which will be moving forward all by next late winter into early spring and by summer.
Hmm.
Right now, they're all moving right, they're all retrograding.
Mm.
And so it feels like we're not making any progress, but there's,
Hmm.
it's like when you have kids, they go through growth spurts,
Yeah.
and it seems like for weeks, for months, nothing happens. Then all of a sudden, there's physical changes or physical. Well, it's like that's where we're at because the outer planets, there's a lot of noise from the inner planets moving forward and making so much change. But the
Mm.
foundation feels like, are we really making any progress foundationally? It feels like we're slipping backwards.
Mm. Interesting. Okay, so keep that in mind, everybody. If
And
there's
I'm going
things
to
that
try to do how this feels. And if I run into a problem, I may regret this, but it feels like this is what's going on. it
running around
feels
in
like
circles.
it feels like I made it all the way around once, but it feels like things are spinning really fast.
Hmm.
And it feels like the foundations are actually moving backwards. I mean, we look at the world events and the craziness without going political in any one area. Nothing is going right. I don't care where you are politically. Things out there are nuts.
Hmm.
And there are a lot of people who are suffering from a lot of different directions of the nutsness.
Mm.
And maybe it's always like that, and social media is just increasing our feedback again and again and again. But it seems like it's even more than usual, even in the United States, where there's so much going on, regardless of how you frame it. We have the United States Army camped out in cities in our own country. This has never happened before. We have stuff that's going on that is just, off the map. And we have, I mean, we could dig deeper into that. We're not going to here, but it's pretty damn crazy there. And it doesn't look like things are going in the right direction, whatever direction it is you think they should be going in.
Mm. Okay, let's talk about how the eclipses are going to paint this whole, add color. So we have the first of two eclipses in September. What's the date? Tell us about that eclipse.
Okay, so the first of the two eclipses is a Pisces full moon eclipse. And first of all, I have to say,
When is it, Rick?
oh, I'm sorry. That eclipse is at 11:08 a.m. Pacific time on on September 7th. So
September.
September 7th is the first of the two eclipses, and that eclipse, the full moon in Pisces, which is very close to the south. It's very close to the north node of the moon, and the sun in Virgo is very close to the south node of the moon. And we have Saturn that's retrograded back into Pisces. Okay.
So, Rick, wait, before you go on, what's the actual date of that first eclipse?
So the first of the two eclipse is a full moon eclipse, and that's September 7th. And it's actually at 11:08 a.m. Pacific time on September 7th. And the moon is in Pisces opposite the sun in Virgo. And so that's the first of the two eclipses. The second eclipse is on September 21st, just afternoon at 12:54 p.m. Pacific time. And that eclipse is interesting because it's at 29 degrees of Pisces. Remember, we just had a new moon in August. I think it was on August 22nd, if I'm not mistaken. We had a new moon at 0 degrees of Virgo, but that wasn't an eclipse. This new moon at 29 degrees of Virgo, two new moons in a row in the same sign, because one was at 0 and one was at 29, is interesting. So we're kind of in this major eclipse season. But before we talk about these eclipses specifically, I have to say that I am not as crazy an eclipse freak as many people are.
Mm.
Not that they are unimportant, but I think that we astrologers sometimes put more weight in maybe making them more sensational than they are. Often eclipses are important because they're a bit of like a time warp. They're a bit of, the nodal axis to me is like wormholes that take things from the past and bring them into the future, or things from the future retrocausally into the present. So there is strangeness that happens. But sometimes I think we astrologers tend to make things more sensational. I mean, it's a new moon and a full moon, but it's kind of like a new moon on steroids and a full moon on steroids, if you will.
Yes. Okay. And just to clarify, because I think before you said it's at 29 degrees of Pisces, you mean 29 degrees of Virgo.
I absolutely mean 29 degrees of Virgo.
Okay.
And
Good.
and the reason why I said Pisces is because I'm thinking in my mind that Saturn, which had moved into Aries on September 1st, turns retrograde. And by both eclipses, the Saturn is back at the last degrees of Pisces. And
Uh,
so and so Saturn is in Pisces, but the new moon eclipse is certainly in Virgo. Thank you for correcting that.
okay. So they'll be opposing.
The Saturn. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Opposing Saturn. Okay. Okay. All right. So you're not as sensationalist about eclipses. And if you had to give us a taste of this energy of these two eclipses, what would you say that it is?
Well, first of all, an eclipse like a full moon or a new moon, we look and see what's going on with the moon. And it turns out that at the full moon eclipse on September 7th, the moon is quincunxing Venus. And so this is not a comfortable eclipse. The moon is also coming into trining Jupiter, so there's some hopefulness around it. And remember, full moon eclipses basically often have to do with letting something go from the past. And hopefully this is not letting go of hope, because it is coming into a trine with Jupiter. But I think this is relatively an uncomfortable eclipse. And I think, though, that the other thing with both of these eclipses is that pattern between Uranus trine Pluto with Neptune at the midpoint during both of these eclipses are the saving grace. And that is that there's something deeper that's stirring, that is almost like where it's almost like a cancer in remission. There's something happening that is going on that is allowing for a potential healing, but whether that healing actually occurs or not is yet to be determined. And it's yet to be determined by what we do, we meaning you and me and every damn other person on the planet. It's what we are doing now, by actually acting locally, even if we're thinking cosmically, that will help to manifest where this unfolds over the weeks ahead and even over the months ahead through next summer, as we talked about earlier. But I don't see the Pisces full moon eclipse as being that potent. Although there are astrologers who will say every eclipse is potent. This eclipse also is conjunct. Well, the eclipsed moon is opposing Mercury, but the sun is close to its conjunction to Mercury, and I think that's important. There's a lot of sesqui squares that are just, to me, adding the sense of discomfort of this eclipse, but I would not put this eclipse as potent or as powerful as the Virgo new moon eclipse on the 21st, which I think is off the charts.
Hmm. Why?
Well, because it occurs at 29 degrees of Pisces. Here I go again. It's at 29 degrees of Virgo, opposing Saturn at 28 and a half degrees of Pisces. It's within, it's about a half a degree in opposition to Saturn. So this new moon eclipse in Virgo is opposite Saturn in Pisces, but Saturn's only temporarily backed up into Pisces because it's really heading back toward its conjunction with Neptune in Aries. Now, the new moon at 29 degrees of Virgo is like -1 degree of Libra. It's just, I mean, in other words,
Ah.
the moon is 2 hours away from being at 0 degrees of Libra. The sun is one day from going at to 0 degrees of Libra. Now, when the moon and the sun, hours after and a day after, go from that 29 degrees of Virgo into Libra, they're going to trine Pluto in Aquarius and Uranus in Gemini and oppose Neptune, which is still in Aries. So it's going to complete this grand trine kite that becomes the predominant pattern that will be with us all the way through next July. And so this eclipse feeds into this grand air trine. Even though it's at 29 degrees of Virgo, it's like pregnant with this grand trine in air. And as such, I think there's a lot of potential here. And you add to that the fact that at the time of the eclipse, Mars is at 29 degrees of Libra, almost almost 0 degrees of Scorpio. And when it goes into Scorpio, it will be squaring Pluto and it will be quincunxing the Saturn and Neptune and Uranus. There's so much dynamic energy here because here's the list. Venus at 2 degrees of Virgo has just changed signs. The sun and moon at 29 degrees of Virgo are just ready to change signs. Mars at 29 degrees of Libra is just ready to change signs. Pluto at 1 degree of Aquarius is just changed signs and is a new sign. Saturn at 28 degrees, 28 and a half degrees of Pisces has just changed signs and is going to go back changing again into Aries. Neptune at 0 degrees of Aries and Uranus at 1 degree of Gemini. Every one of these planets is making an aspect with every one other of these planets,
Mm.
including trines, sextiles, quincunxes, and squares. Yikes. It's lions and tigers and bears, oh my.
Wow. So what does that feel like for us?
Overwhelming.
Overwhelming. Okay.
And what is going to be the resonant energy out of that? Here again, it depends on what we do. This is confusing. It's overwhelming. It's too much information. It's stuff that's being settled. It's things happening out of the blue. It's Mars. Mars is coming into a square with Pluto. One of the important aspects of the month, the Mars squares Pluto, exact on the 24th, just a few days after the eclipse. You know, Mars Pluto energies are not easy energies. They go back to, I mean, the whole, you know, Israel, Palestine, Gaza, that energy has been largely Mars Pluto from
Mm.
1948 onward.
Mm.
But certainly in the past couple of years, the Mars Pluto squares, conjunctions, and oppositions, semi-squares and sesqui-squares have all been seminal in what happens on that. Not always positive, but those squares don't always happen when there's an eclipse that is within a degree or two of a grand trine with Uranus and Pluto. And remember, on the day of the eclipse, and the eclipse itself is on the 21st. On that day, Uranus and Pluto are 7 minutes of arc from being exactly trine, even though that trine is beginning to separate. And by a week later, on October 1st, that 7 minutes of orb has widened to a quarter of a degree, or 15 minutes of orb, still crazy tight. But that eclipse is basically moving through that point, making that grand trine with how tight that Uranus Pluto is. And, and because Neptune and Saturn are also in this mix, there's this sense of social change, deep, powerful social change that maybe is happening outside of the normal realms of change, whether that's social media, whether it's action on the streets, whether it's, I don't know, I can't call it. I'm just saying that this is crazy, profound, powerful, dynamic. The fact that it's opposing Saturn is certainly bumping up against power, authority, government. There's that sense of, we feel like forces are aligned against us and stopping us from what we want to do. There's this sense of, imposition, Saturn making boundaries from the outside, not only on the sun, but on the moon also. There's this feeling of being lost or neglected, or Saturn moon. It's like while we're at home, we're no longer home isn't home anymore. We're not
Mm,
at home when we're at home. I sometimes think of Saturn moon as the snake outgrowing its skin, which seems like a really cool thing evolutionarily, because what happens? The snake sheds its skin.
mm,
That's a cool thing. But the snake can't breathe because the skin is so constricting. And if the snake takes a deep breath, what happens? The skin rips. And that's what's happening here. It's like we can't emotionally fit in, the moon emotionally fit into the structure, the Saturn, the skin that's imposed around us. And so when that skin rips, what happens? Well, many things can happen. First of all, the medical doctors can come in and stitch that skin even tighter. Yikes.
mm,
What can happen is that we're told we can't take a deep breath anymore, because if we do, everything is going to rip.
mm,
Or what happens is that the skin actually does begin to rip. It might hurt and fall off. And what does that leave? It leaves baby butt, bare, tender, vulnerable skin that then needs to figure out how it's going to make its way in this world without that protection of the skin, of the army, of the police, of dad, of the rules, of the law. And of course, at the same time, that eclipse is also trining Pluto, deep evolutionary transformation, death and rebirth, not necessarily physical death. Again, not even physical death. I mean, whenever I think of Pluto, death, rebirth, I always think of William Blake, who wanted on his gravestone, it didn't happen, but he wanted William Blake, born 1757, died many times since.
wow.
And
Mm,
so this eclipse is trining Pluto, and it's also trining Uranus, the revolutionary radical breakthrough planet, while Uranus is harmonizing and getting as close to trining Pluto as it's going to get until next July.
whew, wow. Rick, earlier when you were talking about kids and the growth spurts and how it can seem like nothing's happening and then all of a sudden they shoot up a few inches and they come home and they're like a different person. I always noticed that what preceded that often was an illness or some sort of injury. Like there's something uncomfortable and painful temporarily that preceded this, like, whoa, what just happened? And it sounds like that's what you're describing here as well.
And often what you're describing is the body trying to adjust, trying to hold the status quo. That would be
Mm,
Saturn here,
mm,
holding the status quo. And there's a purpose to it. I mean, we can get all excited about Uranus and Pluto and the future and whatever, but when we think about the future these days, I mean, and I said this going back a couple of years ago, that the future was basically, AI, ARET, and EIEIO. And the AR is augmented reality. computer engaging us in widening our augmented reality, whether they're visual implants or it's the interface between biology and silicon, gallium, whatever is being used, in computer realms. AR. AI, everyone knows. And AI, whether it's, artificial reality, I'm sorry, artificial intelligence, or whether that's, as some people are calling it, augmented intelligence or alchemical intelligence, we know it has problems not just in dumbing down our natural biological processes, but also in its terrible environmental impact that maybe we'll figure out. But we know right now in American cities, there are neighborhoods and areas that are without water because the water supply is being diverted to cool the power plants of these huge server farms. I mean, Memphis, Tennessee is a good example if you want, to Google something. But not only that, but also the draw on electricity and the air pollution, the environmental impact of one AI search is way beyond what we might think. I mean, orders of magnitude beyond just using a computer or turning on a light. And so, but going back to this, we have the future, AR, augmented reality, AI or ASI, which is artificial super intelligence. And then we have ET, which is lurking out there with disclosure and all kinds of other things. And by the way, augmented reality also includes so much that's happening right now in the realms of what I call disincarnate consciousness, whether you call it survival of death. I know you recently had Suzanne Giesman on your show, who I had the privilege of also of meeting. That was set up by my assistant Gail, and so, but that's also a piece of this because it's also pushing our level of intelligence out there. In a way, ET includes that. ETs don't have to be aliens from Arcturus or the Pleiades, although they may be. It's also anything that's not earthbound. And so all of this disincarnate consciousness, it's been around for generations, maybe since the dawning of time, whether it's in reincarnation or past life therapies or in ancestor guides, spirit guides, all of these kinds of things. But this is so much now part of what's going on. It's another piece of this. So we have AI, AR, ET, which is any consciousness that is not earthbound physical form. And then we have EIEIO, which is basically one way or another, we all live on McDonald's farm, and the geese and the ducks and the bulls and the lions and the tigers and the bears all have to figure out how to get along together. And that's the EIEIO part of my formula. So, yeah, where is this going to go? There's a lot of reason to be afraid of what's around the corner, but there's more reasons to be afraid of repeating what we've done in the past forever.
Hmm. Wow. Okay. So spending a little time, I think that can be at the personal level, that can be at the collective level, but are there patterns you're repeating that you would rather not carry into this new phase of life that we are all on the precipice of? And if there are, it seems like this is the time to clean those things up, to start making
Not
different
not
choices.
if not if there are. There are.
There are.
Yeah.
There are.
I don't care who you are or I am or we are. If there aren't, then you're not paying attention.
There we go. All right. So cleaning up some of those older patterns, starting to make different choices, getting underneath why you're doing those things in the first place. Each one of us can only manage our own reality. We cannot control what the rest of the collective is doing, but we do have impact on the collective by our choices as individuals. So staying focused on those things that you can't, that are within your realm
Yeah,
of.
Buckminster Fuller coined the word synergy to mean that 1 + 1 does not equal 2, that 1 + 1 is greater than 2. In
Mm,
other words, synergy is the whole is greater than the sum of its parts.
ah,
You and I And every person watching or listening or viewing this is one of those parts.
Right.
And the whole is greater than all of us. And yet it is our job, our duty, our responsibility to each play our role. This is the act locally part of the thing cosmically, because when everyone is acting locally with care, with love, with compassion, with kindness, with understanding, with wanting to expand our awareness rather than just fearfully suppress someone else's, then all the other problems will cure themselves.
Mm. Hey,
You
Rick.
can't
So,
have top down, authoritative fascist rulership if everyone is taking care of everyone.
mm, well, you certainly don't need it at
You
that
can't have
point.
it. There's no place for it. That's
Right.
right. You don't
Exactly.
need it. It,
Right.
it goes away.
Right. Okay. So we started with a more global perspective of the
Yeah.
month. You
Yeah.
gave us the outer planets, the inner planets, the eclipses. Then we started to go into some more specifics. Can you just, but it was a little bit all over the place because we did it that way. I asked you to do it that way. Can you just walk us through chronologically? You've already explained the energies, but going chronologically, what are those highlight dates that we need to pay attention to? Just the big ones.
Well, I think September 1st, when we have we have Saturn moving back into Pisces, and we have Mars making a square and a half with Uranus. I think that even on the first of the month, we're already, we're energized. Stuff is going on. On the second, Mercury moves into Virgo out of Leo. Maybe we become less loud and more kind of thinking about wanting to figure out what is most useful. And we're actually, through the first part of the month, we're in Virgo territory. People often misunderstand Virgo because they think of it as critical, prissy, careful. And yet Virgo is actually the binary function of the cosmos. Mercury is the place where yes or no happens. That's why Virgos tend to be critical, because the Virgo, you see, the word virgin in ancient societies did not mean someone who did not have sex. It meant a woman who was not owned by a man. And so the two main classes of virgins were the temple priestesses and the prostitutes. They
Mm,
were considered virgins, because they could say no.
mm,
And so this ability for yes, no, actually in the body happens in the colon. This is why astrologically Virgo rules the digestive system in the colon. In the stomach, everything is broken down. What happens in the colon is that as the slurry, is that the right word? As the gunk, as the stuff moves through the colon, in the walls of the colon, the cells say, that's okay, let it through. That's good, let's assimilate it. This is good. Oh, that's not. That's shit. Send it down the road. Pluto takes care of excrement. And so in the body, it's the Virgo function in the colon that says yes or no. This is why Virgo is critical. That's okay. That's okay. That's not okay. That's not okay. That's okay. What's wrong with this picture? Virgo. So we have at the beginning of we have the sun all month, or till the 20th, until the first day of 22nd, until the autumn equinox in the northern hemisphere. We have the sun in Virgo, but we also have Mercury moving through Virgo for much of the month, and it enters Virgo on September 2nd. And Mercury is really flying, but Venus enters Virgo on September 19th. And then Mercury leaves Virgo right around there too. On the 17th, 18th, it enters Libra. So the beginning of the month is about focus. And into that, we have around the third and fourth, kind of like this first buzz of overamping. We have Mars squaring Jupiter and some other planets making half squares, Mercury making half squares to Mars and Jupiter. And I think around the third and the fourth, we just get a bit overwhelmed. And around that same period of time, Uranus makes its retrograde station on the 5th. Uranus turns retrograde. So there's a bit of a turning point there that feeds into the lunar eclipse on the 7th, the full moon eclipse that we talked about. But following that eclipse, there are several days of discomforting energy. They're squares and half squares that a lot of astrologers might not, register, but the 7th, 8th, 9th, even to the 10th. By the 11th, 12th, though, we begin to get a wave of more comfort. The sun and Mercury make sextiles with Jupiter. The energy flows a bit more, moving toward the middle of the month. Although we have a blip or on the a blip. I was going to say a blip on the 5th when Mars, moving toward the end of Aries, of Libra, makes an opposition with Eris and Chiron, and that occurs on the 15th, 16th, 17th, right in there. And so I think we can have a little bit of complications that occur at that point in time, 15th, 16th, 17th. By the 18th, we have Mercury moving into Libra. And when Mercury moves into Libra, it hits that point that the new moon eclipse will hit as the 29 degrees Virgo moves into 0 degrees of Libra. Well, that same thing happens on the 18th, on the 17th, 18th, when Mercury moves from Virgo into Libra. It opposes Saturn, it opposes Neptune. It makes that grand trine communication, Mercury, with Uranus and Pluto. That all happens on the 18th. I think we get some respite right along that period of time. On the 20th, I think the 19th and 20th are a bit complicated. We have some kind of quincunxes, irritating energy that kicks in, leading up to the sun's opposition to Saturn, followed by the new moon eclipse. That all happens on the 20th, 21st, 22nd, 23rd, when the sun is now making that same grand trine the moon made prior. And so we're moving back and forth between these complicated, irritating, annoying, this isn't working, to wow, maybe we have some flow here. And I don't think there's a winner here one way or another. I think a lot of the month has to do with that, holding back the illness or the discomfort from trying to prevent the skin from splitting or growing an inch and a half in a week, to something happens and then and then the growth occurs. Um, and then we get, by the time we hit the 24th, with Mars having moved into Scorpio, and Mars actually leaves Aries and enters Scorpio on the 22nd, right in the mix of everything else. And then Mars is going to form that square with Pluto on the 24th, and its own quincunxes. And again, mixed blessing, but boy, things are being focused, and it's not all comfortable, but it's not all uncomfortable.
Hmm. Rick, what would you say to us to keep in mind for the whole month, if there was something that we could keep in mind?
There's two things. Number one, there's the concept of the iron fist and the velvet glove, and that sometimes we go to the iron fist out of fear to hold a position,
Hmm.
to make sure something doesn't happen or to make sure something does happen. And yet being aware of the value of the velvet glove, of the passivity. And I don't mean denial, I don't mean going along with things that are not okay, but I think a lot of this is about, when do we swing into action? I think that the biggest danger of August and September, but September in particular, is overacting and blowing our chance of actually having the highest level of impact. On the other hand, the second biggest danger is not acting at all and just allowing things to slide, into the future. There's that thing of the idea that a frog thrown into cold water will gradually boil. By the way, this is not true, but it's something that everyone knows about. But that if you put a frog in cold water and gradually warm it up, the frog becomes lethargic and will boil to death. Where if you throw a frog into boiling water, it'll struggle to get out. The danger here is letting this water just get hotter and hotter until we all boil to death.
Mm,
On the other hand, I think it's that balancing of the iron fist and the velvet glove. That's one thing that I think is really important. The other thing that I think is really important is establishing community, because it's with the connection with others that we make that actually gives us the strength to allow our disillusionment to turn into action
mm,
rather than into discouragement.
mm,
Because discouragement kind of means there's nothing I can do. Why bother doing it? Whereas I can be disillusioned and still be encouraged to take action.
mm,
There's the Hopi prophecy that says, we've been talking about, this is totally my paraphrase, we've been talking for years about a time when the rivers will run fast in times of great change. Well, these times are now here. They who hold on to the edge will be torn in half. Push away from the edge into the center where the waters are flowing rapidly. Look around and see who's there. Keep your head above water, but who you see is your new family. This is
mm,
your community. Be joyful.
mm,
That's it. I mean, it's these are crazy times and no one knows what's around the bend. But we all know how to create community. And we all know that it's that community that we create that will create larger communities that will create elected officials. And even regardless of what your politics are, the fact of the matter is that we have to figure out a way to make ground up work rather than top down. That's the order of business, and that's the potential that the astrology shows here. But it's a potential that is not going to happen because trines often will take the course of least resistance.
mm.
And so it's the potential, but we have to act locally.
Whew. Okay. I love that you brought it to that bigger picture perspective of what this time period is about in general, astrologically. This groundswell of collective governing, for lack of a better word, and really turning
Self-governing,
heads.
it's self-realization that then realizes that our leaders have to be part of our own self-realization process
Yeah.
rather than a suppression or burying or denial of something through force.
Mm. Yes. Okay. Love that. And again, I'm going to bring it back to the individual here. We can see where we're doing that in our own lives. Where are we through force or suppression, not addressing things that need to be addressed at the core so that we can actually make a fundamental shift here?
And I agree with you. And I have to say that this is not about red versus blue or
Right.
political ideologies,
Right.
because it doesn't, well, I want to say it doesn't matter what you believe in, but it does. But separate from that, it doesn't matter how far off the spectrum you are one way or another. There are issues of suppression and denial that are still going on.
Hmm.
And so it doesn't matter how enlightened one of us may feel. And I say one of us, I don't mean you versus me. I mean the everyone versus every single individual. It doesn't matter how righteous or how sure you are you have it right. You don't. And neither do I. And
Right.
that's what we all need to confront here is something that moves us into a larger perspective. And again, that's what this ongoing air grand trine, air fire tight with Saturn and Neptune moving into the Aries point here. That's what the potential is being represented here. And it's a matter of, do we have the courage, the fire, the heart, the core? Do we have the courage to actually step into that role and do something about it?
It's like an acknowledgement of the limitations of our own individual perspective, but then also a realization that that's also necessary. Our perspective is both necessary and limited, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's actually by design. And by acknowledging that, we can honor each other's perspectives and also realize we don't have all the answers. And that by working together, we will be able to see a bigger picture
Yeah.
together. Yeah. And I have to say, looking up in that really fast changing river and seeing you, Rick, and seeing all of you out there makes me really happy. It does make me feel super joyful. And the fact that astrology is becoming more and more something that people are turning to for guidance.
I,
And
I agree with you completely. And in doing that, we have to also remember to keep our perspective open enough to realize that not everyone is as privileged to be able to get their head above water,
mm,
that there's a lot of people who do not have the privilege that we have to spend time thinking about cosmic things when they're just simply trying to figure out how to get enough water so that they don't, or their children don't die by sunrise the following day.
which also goes to the responsibility to do what we're doing. I mean, it's both a privilege and a responsibility to be able to be having these conversations, to share these conversations, to think about these things, but then, as you always say, to actually act on these things, not just talk about these things, actually making the changes in our lives. Yeah.
Yeah.
Rick, thank you so much. I want to bring us back to something we talked about in the very, very beginning, which was when you said that we're good at finding legendary astrologers in the making. And Ricky Williams, do you know him? The
Yeah,
former NFL?
I've met him. I don't know him well, but I know him. I know who he is. I know of the work that he's doing with Stephen Forrest,
Right.
and sure, sure.
Yes. Okay. Anyway, so he's an awesome
Yeah,
astrologer.
what a lovely guy.
Lovely guy, NFL football player, Heisman Trophy Award winner, turned astrologer, and he's brilliant and he's so fun to listen to, tells great stories. Anyways, he's teaching a class with us and registration's open right now, and it's on your strongest planet, not your ruling planet, your strongest planet based on the aspects it makes, the proximity to the angles, the strength of the house. There's like three parts of this calculation. It's really fascinating. I've been blown away by it, and our community has too, just starting to play with this. They have it in the Lila app, which is his app. Our community actually gets a longer free trial of his Lila app, the software. So you can check the show notes for that. But then also, if you want to dive into this topic and really learn about it, learn the history, learn the calculations, learn what it means to have X, Y, or Z as your strongest planet. Like, according to this, my strongest planet is Neptune, which I've always thought of myself as a Saturnian person. So this has been like one of those mind-blowing moments, kind of like when you were talking to me about the Capricorn archetype years ago in Chicago and giving me new dimensions to it, just going, oh my God, well, all that makes so much sense. I've had a similar experience with considering Neptune as my strongest planet, not Saturn.
Interesting.
Yes. So if you want to check that out, go to the show notes. We're going to have the links there. And class starts next week, I believe.
Cool.
Yeah. So go check that out. And I
And
know
be,
you have some upcoming events as well.
Yeah, before we go, I just wanted to mention two things in passing. We're getting up to a full enrollment on my annual initiation into astrology retreat in the south end of Goa, India. Not going to spend a lot of time talking about it, but there's a complete day by day activities list at Heaven and Earth Workshops. Just click on workshops. And I think we have about 5 places open. We have about 25 people in it already. It's every year I teach this or lead this. It's an amazing, amazing event. I won't say more about it. If you've never been to India, this is probably the safest and easiest place in India to exist. I call this area of India I call it India Light, like Bud Light or Miller Light. Uh,
Yeah.
but that's November 20th through December 2nd. It's a 12-day workshop at an Ayurvedic healing spa, just like a 3-minute walk from a magical swimmable beach on
Mm.
the Arabian Sea. That's one. Secondly, I want to mention that I will be participating, giving 3 lectures and a panel discussion, and on a 10-day or maybe it's a 12-day, I might be cruise in the Aegean that's leaving from Athens. And this is next March, around March 20th, I think is the date. And you can find out more about it and even register for it at Mystery School at Sea, all one word, mysteryschoolatsea.com. And if you do find this fascinating, there's some really cool other teachers there, some other astrologers, some people who are working in disclosure and UFOs and other ascension related kind of topics. If you do sign up for it, just make sure that you tell them that you learned about it from me so that I get credit for your being there, because it's part of what the deal is. Anyhow, I'm really looking forward to it. The stops are amazing. Greek islands and a couple of stops in Turkey, all on the Aegean Sea in a luxury cruise.
I love the idea of a mystery school at sea. That's just so That's
Mysteryschoolatsea.com.
amazing. Okay. So yes, to live events to check out, Ricky Williams' Strongest Planet. I believe it's astrologyhub.com/strongest planet. So you can check it out there. And or if that doesn't work, go check the show notes. Okay. Thank you, everybody. Rick, you're amazing. That was so much
Thank you.
fun. I always walk away from these feeling like, okay, I got it. I know what's happening. I can plan accordingly and think with all these things in mind, to keep them in mind as I navigate my life. So I hope all of you feel that way as well. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being a part of our community. Thank you as always for making astrology a part of your life. We'll definitely catch you on the next episode. Take care, everybody.